Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from The Federalist. This is dated July 27th, and we're going to pick on Dr. Fauci because now we can do that, and it's fine, and hopefully YouTube decides like it's well past the time that these videos are going to be struck from the internet. So this one's called Fauci Toadies, privately called lab leak theory, highly likely, while publicly shutting it down. So that seems to be a recurring theme with the Fauci testimony, and then what he was saying behind the scenes was he said one thing to the people and he said something completely different behind the scenes, and he made everybody's life a lot worse. So subheading here says the greatest threat to public trust comes when powerful people and institutions use their authority to suppress the truth. I wonder who he's referring to, but let's get into it. It says the latest revelations from Senator Rand Paul's investigation into the origin of COVID expose what may be one of the most consequential scientific deceptions in history. The 1,123 pages of private Slack messages exchanged among the authors of the highly influential Proximal Origin paper reveal that the scientists who publicly declared that a laboratory origin of COVID was not plausible privately held a very different view. They repeatedly acknowledged that a laboratory origin remained possible, discussed flaws in their own arguments, and struggled to defend the natural origin theory. In the first batch of Slack messages between the authors, which was released by the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic in 2023, why didn't we hear about this back then? I don't remember that at all, but okay. It says Christian Anderson of Scripps Research, the lead author of Proximal Origin, privately described the possibility of a laboratory origin as friggin' likely. In another exchange, he wrote, the main issue is that accidental escape is in fact highly likely, it's not some fringe theory. And elsewhere, another author acknowledged that COVID easily could have leaked from a laboratory. Yet only weeks later, on March 17th of 2020, they published Proximal Origin, declaring that a laboratory-based scenario was not plausible. So they're covering for somebody, it seems. Then continuing on, it says, when those earlier messages became public, Anderson offered a simple explanation. Oh, wait, I do remember this. Okay, never mind. I lied before. Well, I didn't lie. I forgot. I'm stupid. Anyway, let's go on. It says he argued that his initial doubts had been resolved before publication and that the messages merely reflected a normal scientific process of considering possibilities before reaching a conclusion. The latest Slack disclosures completely destroy that claim. The doubts did not disappear after publication. The newly released messages show the authors continuing to wrestle with evidence they found troubling. In one exchange from June of 2020, Anderson wrote, quote, gotta say, some smoking-ish gun starting to appear that I'm not comfortable with, end quote. But rather than publicly admitting that their paper got it wrong, they instead discussed strategies for defending the natural origin theory and finding arguments that could preserve it despite mounting problems. There's a problem when the folks that we would consider like the experts don't admit fault to things that they were wrong about. That's a problem, okay? Because that's the kind of thing that makes people stop trusting you. Okay, when we all know you're wrong, but you keep going, no, where are you're like, we're right. And it's like, well, you're not, and we know that, and that's a huge part of the problem here. So next section says the genesis of the paper and the hidden hand of Anthony Fauci. To understand why the scientists doubled down on their deception, it is necessary to understand how Proximal Origin came into existence and how it became one of the most influential scientific papers of the modern era. Proximal Origin was conceived during a secret teleconference convened by Anthony Fauci on February 1st of 2020, as concerns grew that COVID might have originated from a laboratory. During that call, Fauci directed a group of scientists, led by Anderson and Robert Gary of Tulane University, and including Andrew Rambot of the University of Edinburgh and Edward Holmes of the University of Sydney, to produce a paper addressing the possibility of a laboratory origin. Lipkin did not participate in the Slack exchanges that have since become public. Upon its March 17, 2020 publication in Nature Medicine, the article reached a sweeping conclusion that a lab-based scenario was entirely implausible. And I hope it goes into the explanation of why, because I'd really like to know that. Let's see what it says. It says, despite Fauci's central involvement in initiating the effort and shaping the discussion around the paper, his role was not disclosed to the public. The public was left with the impression that Proximal Origin represented an independent scientific assessment rather than a paper whose creation had been facilitated by the nation's leading infectious disease official. That omission was particularly consequential because Fauci had himself been involved in funding gain-of-function research conducted at the Wuhan Institute of Virology after similar research had been restricted to the United States, making him not merely a commentator on the controversy, but a figure directly implicated in the questions the paper sought to settle. So this dude, I mean, already was kind of like shady as hell, and I mean, if you don't think he was shady and that he's not really that well liked besides in like the certain government circles, go look up what he did during the AIDS pandemic, or the AIDS scare, whatever you want to call it, back in like the 80s and 90s. If you haven't seen the movie Dallas Buyers Club, Anthony Fauci is the villain in it. So just to give you an idea of what's been thought of him over time, like he's like the people who have dealt with him where he's been like the guy in charge absolutely do not like him, and they to a degree that like I can't even mention how they feel about him on YouTube without my channel being completely annihilated. Just go look it up, or watch Dallas Buyers Club, or don't even watch that because that has nothing to do with him, but whatever, just look it up. It says, when President Donald Trump raised the possibility of a laboratory origin on April 17th of 2020, Fauci cited proximal origin as evidence that the theory was unsupported. Fauci even told reporters that he could not recall the names of the authors. The reality was that he had been involved with them from the beginning. Dude just lies like, I mean, they call him a rat, and, well, that's pretty appropriate. This is quickly becoming one of the most cited scientific publications in history. Proximal origin established itself as the definitive authority on the origins of COVID, serving to dismiss anyone who argued that a laboratory leak deserves serious investigation. After the paper's publication, several of the authors received tens of millions of dollars in grant funding through Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, or NIAID, N-I-A-I-D. The newly released Slack messages show that Fauci's involvement did not end once the paper was published. On May 3rd, 2021, the day reports emerged that 3 researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology had been hospitalized with COVID-like symptoms in November of 2019. Anderson revealed that he had just met with Fauci and his team. November in 2019, I remember Thanksgiving break that year. I remember I was so looking forward to being off for 4 days, and I had zero plans because my parents were in Florida at the time, so I was basically on my own for Thanksgiving. Otherwise, I'd be with them, and I was just so happy to just have nothing to do, and I came down with, like, I remember on that Wednesday, I woke up and my throat was kind of not feeling too good. I was like, please God, don't be a cold. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. And it knocked my ass out for the entire weekend. And then COVID happened a few months later. And I remember thinking, like, did I have COVID then, or just a hell of a cold? Like, I don't know. But that's why November 2019 rings a bell for me and kind of always sticks out. But anyway, continuing on. So it says, this Anderson person says, just had a meeting with Fauci and his team this morning, he wrote. They get it and deeply appreciate what we're doing, so we'll keep dancing. 3 days later, President Biden ordered an intelligence review into COVID's origins. Days after that, Fauci's emails revealing the secret February 2020 teleconference became public under FOIA. That's the that's the Information Act. I can't remember the FOIA thing. You can, whatever. I can't think straight during this, obviously, but again, if you need to know what FOIA is, just go look it up. Anyway, technical flaws in private admissions is our next section here. It says, in truth, the problems with proximal origin were visible from the beginning. One of the most important examples involved the author's claim that COVID could not have been engineered because it did not contain a known viral backbone. I remember hearing that. It says, the argument was presented as a decisive reason to reject a laboratory origin. Yet the paper's own citation pointed to a list of known viral backbones from 2014. Even if that list had been complete, it could not possibly account for years of subsequent research. The authors were effectively arguing that because the virus did not match something contained in an incomplete historical catalog, laboratory manipulation was impossible. Like so much else in the paper, this was an assumption presented as a conclusion. Another flawed assumption that has since been exposed involved the author's claim that because the COVID virus did not bind tightly to human cells, it could not have been engineered. This was essentially an exercise in speculation, assuming what a hypothetical designer would or would not have done. More importantly, the theory had already been challenged by another scientist, Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina. Barrick had shown that excessively tight binding could actually make a virus less effective because it could cause the virus to become trapped rather than spread efficiently. And I don't know anything about how that stuff works. I'm just going to take their word for it. As the newly released Slack messages also revisited one of the paper's principal arguments. In Proximal Origin, the authors argued that engineering the COVID virus would have been difficult. Yet Anderson later wrote, "In our paper, we argue against A, manipulation, and B, tissue culture. Our main arguments were that manipulation is hard, but the Germans," spelling error there, the Germans came out, yeah, it shouldn't be an apostrophe there. The Germans came out and created a reverse genetic system of SARS-2 in less than 2 weeks, so clearly it's not that hard. I wouldn't know. To me, that seems like an impossible thing, because I don't know anything about that. Continuing on, it says, the exchange reflected a reassessment of one of the paper's central technical arguments. But again, neither Anderson nor the other authors ever publicly acknowledged this central flaw. Perhaps the most damaging revelation concerns one of the paper's central claims. In Proximal Origin, the authors wrote, basic research involving passage of bat SARS-CoV-like coronaviruses in cell culture and or animal models has been going on for many years in biosafety level 2 laboratories across the world. That statement created the impression that this type of coronavirus research was a widespread and routine activity being conducted in laboratories around the globe. But in private, Anderson acknowledged that this description was misleading. Quote, we describe this in the paper and say that this work is performed all of the world, but that isn't true, and has exclusively been going on at WIV, or the Wuhan Institute of Virology, end quote. Had they not deceived the public, a striking coincidence would have been laid bare. A virus sharing the exact characteristics of those studied at the Wuhan Institute of Virology emerged right on the doorstep of the laboratory conducting the research. Other scientists recognized many of these fundamental flaws when the Proximal Origin preprint was published in February 2020. Microbiologist Rossana Segreto offered detailed critiques of the paper and issued an eerily prescient warning of a contemporaneous message. Quote, are some virologists scared that the truth will come out and the research will be limited? I am ready to take the risk to see also my work limited. Playing with fire is dangerous without precautions, end quote. And next section says institutional power and the enduring lesson. When we zoom out, perhaps the biggest question raised by this scandal is how a paper with such profound flaws, and whose own authors privately continued to question its conclusions, became one of the most cited scientific papers in history. How did it happen that Fauci, the media, universities, public health institutions, and countless others embraced it so completely? How did a paper built on deception become a tool for shutting down debate? The Proximal Origin episode demonstrates the danger that arises when institutional authority becomes a substitute for evidence. Experts provide authority, prestigious journals provide legitimacy, government officials lend credibility, and the media amplifies the resulting message. Together, these institutions can create an environment in which a contested conclusion is elevated into accepted fact. That is the enduring lesson of Proximal Origin. The greatest threat to public trust does not come from disagreement or scientific uncertainty. It comes when powerful people and institutions use their authority to suppress the truth. And that's basically what happened during COVID. So that this man right here on the screen just decided he was going to become the ruler, the dictator, the authoritarian ruler of the country, and kind of got away with it. And in last week, by the time you hear this, the hearings with Rand Paul and him being Fauci saying, they're pleading the fifth basically on every question, even when he was asked, like, what color is his tie or what color is the carpet, tells me that he knows he effed up, because I think the thing was, and I'm not a lawyer or anything, but, like, he's protected by he was already protected by the immunity that Joe Biden gave him, so he's not allowed to plead the fifth because he can't self-incriminate at this point. So what he was doing was actually a contempt of Congress, and if they vote to hold him in contempt of Congress, he could still go to prison, but not for a very long time. But that would be, even if he went away for like a year, which is what I think the maximum term is, that's not enough to undo the damage, and that's not enough to make people feel like justice was done. I can't say on here what I want to happen to the man, just for all those other people that had to, see family members die through Zoom, or be the only person at a funeral because you were the only one allowed to be there. But hopefully justice is done, and hopefully we find out fairly soon. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.